Start with the thesis.
Okay.
I'll go back to what I was trying to say.
The thesis that ruined my life. I'm going to do a follow-up thesis, a dissertation discussing the fact that this thesis ruined my life and changed my perspective and broke my soul, pretty much, essentially. It's a working title.
The reason I even brought it up is because it made me think differently.
Okay.
So when you brought up the questions, and I forget his name, and you'll probably bring it up, thank you. And just the idea of when you're working, you have a certain mentality, and then when, you know, being an immigrant especially, and then when you're back home, you have a separate personality. I think he refers it to African Americans, and
yes,
then,
he does,
and how you have to act around certain people at work professionally and not fully authentically, and then you have a dual personality when you come back. Because you asked me that, and I never even thought of that until then. And then since I've thought of that, I'm like, holy fuck, I am so different sometimes at work,
of course,
or around certain people, and
So you want me to explain my thesis now?
Yeah.
Because you keep asking me and then you keep talking.
Sorry. Okay.
Bruh.
I'm excited.
All right. So my thesis, I don't even remember it because I'm trying to forget it. It was so traumatic. But basically it was discussing authenticity in the workplace and how it pertains to visible minorities. And I used W.E.B. Du Bois' theory on the other self, the double consciousness. That's not the correct name for it, but basically he has this theory that says that as a Black person, you show up in the space and you have these two ideologies, who you are versus who the world perceives you to be.
Oh boy.
And so you have to be always conscious of who you are being perceived to be in the spaces because you are not accepted. So we live with this veil over ourselves, never truly ever being present because we're always perceiving ourselves as other people perceive us instead of living our lives how we are truly supposed to show up in that space and be authentic because of the color of our skin. So we're always going to be on the outside and an other based on that. And what I did was broaden his thesis, not to just focus on Black people, but I asked the question to different ethnic minorities to see if they had the exact same experience of this two-ness. Because I know for myself, I show up in certain spaces, especially in white spaces, I speak differently. I code switch easily because I've learned how to, but when I go back to the hood, I'm like, yeah, bruh, this, that, da 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 da. So you have to learn how to turn it on and off because in a professional setting, that is not appropriate. That is, you're looked down upon because you're like, oh my gosh, are you ghetto? And it's just like the amount of people that come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so well spoken for a Black person. And I'm like, is that a compliment or an insult? I'm not sure because it honestly falls underneath both categories.
Compliment.
So I took that paper and I talked to 18 different people, you being one of them.
It's out there.
9 men, 9 women of different ethnic backgrounds. And I asked the question, how they show up in these spaces. And do you feel that you can, as a visible minority, show up and be your authentic self? And how I perceived it to be was from my own experience as a Black person. But how they talked about it and how they learned how to be themselves was completely different. And their two-ness showed up in a completely different way than our two-ness as Black people do.